10 years ago, 20 years ago, the role of people like Forrest Kinney and Bradley Soash and Tony Karamia and these really inspiring people, like their job was to convince people that it was valuable. And now as my generation of pedagogues and hopefully leaders in this work, like now I think a lot of people are bought in that it is important and valuable. And now we have to actually figure out and teach teachers how to teach it. And so it's kind of an exciting moment in piano pedagogy where actually I think people are saying like all students or almost all students should learn these skills that aren't just playing the music note for note on a page. So I'm really grateful to those people I named and many others who have like really done important work convincing everybody that it's important.
Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Hello, piano teachers. Welcome to the show. Have you ever thought, I would like to add more improvisational elements into my teaching, but there just isn't time in the lesson, or I don't even know where to start? If that's you, my guest today has the solution for you. Jeremy Siskind is on the podcast today sharing some really practical tips for incorporating improvisation into lessons, as well as sharing the steps to start learning jazz yourself, even if you've never played jazz before. I had so much fun talking with Jeremy, and I think you're really going to love this interview today. Here's a little bit about Jeremy. Jeremy Siskind is the rare musician whose imaginative albums land on best of lists, while his groundbreaking instructional books populate bestseller lists. A top finisher in national and international jazz piano competitions, Siskind is a two-time laureate of the American Pianist Association and the winner of the Nottingham International Jazz Piano Competition. A sought-after educator, Siskind has published more than 20 instructional books, including Playing Solo Jazz Piano and the groundbreaking Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. Besides Siskind's own YouTube channel, which boasts over 25,000 subscribers, Siskind is frequently seen teaching on digital platforms like Tonebase, Open Studio, and Piano with Johnny, as well as presenting webinars and in-person lectures for the Francis Clark Institute, the Music Teachers National Association, and the Imagine Solutions Conference. Siskind helps to guide education and pedagogy surrounding improvisation and composition. Siskind spreads peace through music in places like Lebanon, Tunisia, and Thailand with the nonprofit organization Jazz Education Abroad. Jeremy Siskind is a Yamaha artist. Here's my interview with Jeremy Siskind. Hi, Jeremy. Welcome to the show. Would you mind introducing yourself for maybe the one person who's listening who doesn't know you, and just tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Rachel. My name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm a jazz pianist, I guess, first and foremost. I am a full-time college professor at Fullerton College, where I offer both in-person and remote classes, teaching people how to play jazz piano. I'm also an author. I've got about 18 books out with Hal Leonard, and I also have my own publishing company where I've been writing jazz instructional books. And then maybe finally, I hate the term YouTuber. Like that just like makes me cringe, but I do have a YouTube channel. We're coming up on 30,000 subscribers. I post 2 kind of instructional videos a week on that YouTube channel. So that's something of the universe of what I do.
Okay. Wow. You're busy. There were even things in there that I didn't know you were doing. Well, let's go back to the beginning. I would love to know what your early piano lessons looked like.
So I don't come from a particularly musical family. Like, you know, if you trace far back enough on the family tree, you can find some little glimmers here and there. But really, my parents happened to have a piano and said, hey, let's sign up the boys. It was me and my older brother for piano lessons. And in retrospect, we didn't know how lucky we were because the closest music school was a Yamaha Music School. And I got the best music education, I believe, at that Yamaha Music School. And it just so happened that at any time Yamaha has one of their branches, one of their locations, that's the corporate school, meaning that it's kind of, instead of being franchised out to an owner, it's run from the central Yamaha headquarters, and they use it to, pilot new programs and to really track And it happened to be this school that was 2 blocks away from my house. So my parents, not knowing anything, signed up for this really incredible Yamaha Music School. And I say this half seriously, half jokingly, my older brother hated it. And so I decided that I loved it. And of course, the more I loved it, the more he hated it, and vice versa. And so I ended up, just falling head over heels for music. And at that school, we got a pretty traditional music education. I learned how to read music. I learned how to play classical pieces. But we also had group classes where we played ensembles using different keyboard sounds. I remember playing like the Brandenburg Concerto and being violin one. And we learned keyboard harmony. We did composition. I remember writing my very first composition, which was called Finding Bugs, at age 4 or 5. We did improvisation. And in fact, later, as I got towards my teens, some of these Yamaha concerts, we would be on stage and we would do what they called motivic improvisation, where somebody from the audience would come up and play a surprise motif for us. And on stage, we would improvise a whole piece based on that motif. And so it was this incredibly supportive environment. And, people ask as a normal question, like, when did you get into jazz piano? How did you transition? And for me, there was definitely a moment when I took jazz-specific lessons and really played in my school jazz band and learned that style specifically. But in terms of some of the skills of finding chords, improvising, playing in an ensemble, like, it wasn't unfamiliar to me. In many ways, it was a continuation of that education. So I'm a big fan of what they do at Yamaha and how holistic and supportive that education network was for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like a lot of teachers are starting to see the value of group classes and improvisation and these things now. But I think back then, I mean, you're probably younger than I am, but I know at least when I was taking lessons, those things weren't popular. And so it's interesting to see a little farther down the journey what it could turn into. I mean, look at you and how that set you up for such great success.
Yeah. And, so I'm also the chair of the creative track for the National Conference for Keyboard Pedagogy. And I feel like, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the role of people like Forrest Kinney and Bradley Soash and Tony Karamia and these really inspiring people, like, their job was to convince people that it was valuable. And now, as my generation of pedagogues and hopefully leaders in this work, like, now I think a lot of people are bought in that it is important and valuable. And now we have to actually figure out and teach teachers how to teach it. And so it's kind of an exciting moment in piano pedagogy where actually I think people are saying, like, all students or almost all students should learn these skills that aren't just playing the music note for note on a page. So I'm really grateful to those people I named and many others who have, like, really done important work convincing everybody that it's important.
Yeah. And I will tell you, as an old dog here, it's hard to learn the new tricks when I wasn't trained that way. It's so easy to slip back into the way I was taught. And even though I see the value of the improvisation and all of these things, it's still so hard for me to incorporate it into the lessons. Do you have any advice for me? I know that wasn't on the list of questions, but
Yeah, but this is a question that we get a lot. And it's, first, let me just say that it is hard. We have so much to do with our students, and often it's so little time, a half hour, 45 minutes. Some of my committee mates did a presentation about this for NCKP, and they proposed kind of 3 different ways. So one is what one of my colleagues calls an improv week. And they set aside a week in the calendar, and they're very smart about it. They try to plan a week that like students usually wouldn't have practiced, like right after spring break.
Oh, sure. Right after the recital or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or, relating to a holiday, right? The kids come in jazzed up about Halloween in their costume. And it's like, well, how much work are we going to get done on our repertoire, right? And so she has an improv week that she puts into the calendar each semester where, okay, we're going to set aside our normal routines and we're going to focus on improvisation for at least part of the lesson. So that's one model. Another colleague says he uses it as kind of a warm-up each lesson. He has a 5-minute improvisation activity that, instead of starting with technique and scales, how would your lesson feel different if you were like, here's a chord progression and why don't you use these 5 notes and see what you can come up with, right? So that's another possible model. Or, I guess it could also be your lesson dessert, right? At the end of the lesson, okay, you've earned a little moment to do this. And then, lastly, another colleague was talking about integrating these things into repertoire. So picking a part of a piece where, okay, this 8 bars for the B section, we're going to, instead of playing the melody exactly as written, we're going to practice using a little tetrachord, a 4-note group or something, and improvising that melody. Or maybe we're going to improvise the accompaniment here. We're going to change the rhythm, or we're going to move from broken chords to more of an oompa accompaniment. Improvisation doesn't have to be this scary thing where you're inventing jazz wholesale. It can be as simple as saying, well, let's look at this music, and it's more malleable than you might think. It doesn't have to be exactly that way. So those are 3 models that hopefully you could envision yourself doing one of those 3, incorporating it into your lessons without losing this valuable time that we need just to get our students ready for the recital, which I've done that kind of teaching, and I understand the struggle.
Yeah. And I think what I'm hearing from you is the value of planning ahead to do it. For people like me where it doesn't just flow naturally, I have to plan ahead. Like, I'm going to do an improv week, or I'm going to use it as the warm up, and then it will be more likely that I'll incorporate it.
Yeah, we all thrive off of routine, right? And especially for busy teachers with busy lives with kids and multiple students, we probably don't do that advanced lesson planning as much as we would like. So if we don't build this into our routines, then we're going to fall back into our old ways, right? So it's a matter of, if it's a weekly routine, great. If it's a daily routine, great. But, make it part of what you do. Otherwise, we'll just fall back into our old habits.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk a little about jazz piano, because that is your specialty and what you're known for. You make it look so easy. When I watch your YouTube videos, and I mean, I find this true across the board watching jazz pianists, that they just make it look so easy. Does it feel easy to you, or did at some point it start to feel easy? Or because when you break it down, when I read about jazz piano or when I hear someone teach, it's not simple at all. Like, the theory and everything behind it is astonishing. So tell me how it feels to you.
I don't know. Easy isn't like the first word that comes to mind, but so for me, language is such a useful metaphor, and particularly because I'm really working hard to study Spanish. We were talking before we started that I have a 14-month-old son. We are really intentionally trying to raise him bilingual. And so I've been intensively studying Spanish for the last 3 years. And to me, playing jazz is somewhat like having a conversation in English, right? In a native language. In that, it's not inherently hard. I think to say something really interesting like that is, to entertain people for 60 or 90 minutes, like, that's hard. It's like being a stand-up comic and being on stage for 60 or 90 minutes. But the act of just doing it, that's not that hard, right? Just like speaking to you is not that hard. Now, I can so relate to where my students are at when I'm studying Spanish, because there are so many things contending for my attention: my accent, my verb conjugation, sentence structure, whether I'm in past or present tense, vocabulary. And, one by one, as I make my Spanish journey, as I get further and further down the road, I can put more of those things just back in my subconscious of, okay, I kind of like, here's a formula. I know, I've got it. I don't have to think about translating that word because I've said it so many times now. And I am not at the point after 3 years where it's easy at all. Just to have that basic conversation, much less, entertain people for 60 or 90 minutes. And I think it's going to be a 7 or 10 or more year process to the point where speaking in Spanish feels easy to me. And I think that's very often people's experience with jazz too, that at the beginning, there's so many just basic things contending. There's contending for your attention. There's the articulation. There's the note choice. There's the left hand. There's voicings. There's, style. There's all these things. And so many learners now are adults, and you know how it's supposed to sound, right? And you're playing, and it does not sound like that yet. I mean, for my students, I preach, first of all, patience and baby steps and going really slow, trying to take one element at a time and really focus on one element at a time and not expect to sound like your heroes after one semester of study or 2 semesters of study, but just keep moving down that path towards greater and greater mastery.
Yeah. And I think the other frustration is that I already play the piano, so I feel like it shouldn't be as big of a leap, but it is. I mean, even when I watch someone like you play, it feels like you're playing a completely different instrument. It's kind of like when I tried to learn the organ and I was like, oh, this shouldn't be that hard because I already play the piano. And then it was like impossible. So frustrating.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I teach a lot of classical piano teachers. I have this remote Fullerton class, and I have about 50 students every semester, including usually 15 or 20 piano teachers. And there's such an advantage because your coordination is good. Your music theory knowledge is good. You've got the technical chops. You've generally got the fingering. And those things are all advantages. But the disadvantage is usually that you have really specific training of how to do something that there requires a little bit of unlearning, right? Both unlearning of some technical habits that are just going to be really different from classical articulation to jazz articulation, but also just unlearning of a lot of things that maybe are stuck in your head, right? Of, well, I shouldn't really be doing this, or, oh, I really don't want to sound that. I don't want to hit a wrong note. And I definitely have students that have these things so internalized from years of study that it's hard to take on that beginner's mindset truly when you're really deep into your training.
Yeah. So where do you start with those piano teachers? What's the first thing that you work on with them?
One of the first things, and the very first thing in my Jazz Piano Fundamentals book, it's a podcast, they can't see my advertisement.
I can see that.
One of the very first things I like to have them do is a drone improvisation. And this just creates a safe space for them to improvise. And so what that means, and I'm going to flick on original sound here on Zoom, I'm just going to hold at the beginning just a low C and G. And then my first direction is just to make some melodies that you like using the white keys. So out of time, no jazz feel. We don't have to think about swing. And I'm not expecting any fancy note choices or fancy scales, but just, can you make some short melodies that sound nice? And we go through that a few times and we do what I call focus prompts. Trying to learn some of the basic musical skills. And many of these just are not even jazz related. Like the first thing that I have my students do is consider whether they're really listening to themselves as they play or whether they're just kind of pushing buttons, right? Because a lot of people as they improvise say, okay, well, the assignment is to improvise in C, so I'm just going to press notes. I'm going to press white keys, right? But if you're not listening to yourself, you're never really going to make music. Just like if I'm not listening to myself speak Spanish, I'm never going to make sense. A second thing that we focus on is playing in clear phrases with a direction, a sense of beginning and ending. And then a third thing I usually do on the very first day of class is we talk about varying hand shape, right? A lot of beginning improvisers, even if they're really good pianists, kind of start and stay in a closed hand position. And they don't cross over and under or spread out their hand to use some bigger intervals. So, this isn't jazz specific at all. If you want to improvise in any style, you're going to need to get into these habits, listening to yourself, playing in phrases, having your hand take on different shapes. So we start on that very basic kind of a thing. We talk about swing articulation, which is very different than classical articulation. And then we learn some melodies to jazz tunes. Could be Take the A Train, Satin Doll, practicing jazz articulation and practicing some common jazz left-hand patterns. And then the next step in improvisation for me, is usually the blues. And a lot of us are familiar with the blues. It's such a great place to teach improvising because we can stick within a single 6-note scale and make a lot of music within the blues. And it's another great place to talk about phrasing, to talk about being expressive, repetition, grace notes, adding inflection to your playing, and just making really clear melodies. So those are some of the first activities I do with if you were to sign up for my Fullerton jazz class, those are the first. Yeah, it's very affordable for California residents.
Maybe I will. Do you have an in-person one too? Okay, I could come to in-person.
You totally could.
For our listeners, Jeremy and I are neighbors, not too far away.
Just about.
Just about. All right. So it sounds to me like I need to think more about layering the different things rather than getting overwhelmed by I have to do all of these things to make it sound like jazz. It's a process of layering, just like you were talking about with language is a process of layering.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, maybe this makes me a total hypocrite. This is one of the worst things about our information landscape is that people who are interested in jazz, you can, there's all these incredible videos and resources and they're interesting, especially if you like music theory, like it's so interesting to learn about different exotic scales and rhythmic schemes. But the number one mistake that I see most kind of casual amateur learners making is that they get overwhelmed and they don't really stick with one thing for a while. And so that was part of my impetus in writing my books. I think one strength of my fundamentals books is that each unit comes with assignments. It has about 6 or 7 assignments. And each unit's like, I give the advice that you should spend about 2 weeks working through the assignments for each unit before moving on to the next one. And I think that kind of a scheme where you're tackling just a small subset of things and not worrying about all the things that you're not doing, all the ways you're not playing, all the skills you're not getting, we know that that's going to be much more effective than saying, oh, I heard this tune over here. Oh, I learned about this scale. Let me try to learn it. You're not going to learn things that way, particularly as an adult when, I'm sorry to say, we need a lot more time to digest and learn and have things be sticky in our minds.
Yeah. And I think as adults too, it's harder for us to go back to the basics of not being able to do something. Like for kids, it's normal for them to just be playing a couple notes and it's no big deal because they're also learning, how to read and the alphabet and whatever. And as adults, we want the finished product right away.
Yes. Yep. I think that is very true. Another thing, you didn't ask this, but you made me think of it. Another thing that I think is really important in jazz education, which is hard for us pianists to really comprehend, is that you almost need to be doing it with a group. And again, I'm going to go to my language analogy, which is that, I completed Duolingo, which is really good, solid background, and it's years of work. Like it's a lot. And then I had my first lesson with a Spanish tutor, couldn't say a thing.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I was almost literally speechless. And I thought I'd achieved a pretty good level in this language. But there's a difference, right, between having the book learning, having the learning in isolation, and then actually speaking to somebody, being able to do it in real time, having kind of some formulas that to fall back on, just knowing how to have a conversation. And it's very much the same with playing jazz, which, you can have all the book learning, you could do it in isolation, but it's logging those hours, immersing yourself, right? Like we would in a language, playing with a group that's going to kind of meet and form a nexus with that intellectual learning. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. Are you talking about playing with a group like a combo or playing with other pianists, like having a teacher and...
Better to play with a combo, that like.
I just want to clarify if that's
what you mean. Like a combo or a big band, that is going to be the ideal place to learn. I know that those things are hard to find. So playing live with a teacher would be a great next step, or if you have another pianist friend and one of you can kind of be the bass player and one of you can be the pianist, like those are all good. But in a perfect world, I would have each of my students also playing in a 5 or 6 piece band and just, failing for the first 4 rehearsals, right? like I did.
Yeah, that sounds pretty intimidating, like to walk into that setting.
There's no amount of preparation. I truly believe there's no amount of preparation that you can have that you will walk into that first rehearsal and feel comfortable and sound good, right? The only preparation for doing it is just doing it and failing the first few rehearsals and figuring out your coping mechanisms. Just like me in my Spanish lessons, I did as much preparation as I could possibly imagine. And then that first lesson, it was like, oh, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And that's why playing in a group is so important. Like you have to learn those skills on the job. And I think teachers can relate. Like you could study pedagogy forever, and then you go into that first lesson with a student, and they're not the student that's in your mind necessarily, right? They have another agenda. Their parents want this, and they're distracted by this issue. And it's like, oh, you know, there's a certain degree to which you have to learn by doing it, right?
Totally, yes. Since you brought up your books, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your books. And then I also want to talk a little bit about YouTube before we finish up. So tell us about the books and who they're for and how they could help pianists.
Yeah, so I have a few different things going on. Kind of my biggest series is the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. And there's 3 books in the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. Each has 12 units. And like I mentioned, I kind of recommend you spend about 2 weeks on each unit. Of course, depending how fast you like to move, everybody's going to be different. But the general idea is that you could finish book 1 in about 6 months. And these books are for somebody who plays the piano. You know, I like to say you can play all your major scales, and maybe you can play a beginning Bach convention or Chopin prelude would be cool. But you don't know anything about jazz. It starts you really holding your hand from the very beginning of a jazz journey. And I believe that by the time you get done with book 1, that is a good time to try to start playing with an ensemble. Like I said, you're not going to be successful your very first time, but you're going to have enough knowledge that it's going to be really important to go and practice and reinforce that knowledge. And then book 2 has another 12 units. And by the time you're done with that book, you're going to have some solo piano playing skills. You're going to be able to really play a wide range of jazz tunes. And you might be at the point where you're one of the more qualified members of your ensemble if you get done with book 2. And then book 3 is about modal and modern jazz, which, you know, is kind of like a different angle of looking at the jazz theory and the jazz tradition. The other series I would mention for your audience is I have a solo standards for piano, which is solo piano arrangements of standard tunes. And I wrote this book in response to a lot of piano teachers and others who are looking for kind of professional sounding pianistic versions of the great jazz standards that we all love. And so right now there's one book that has 8 standards. The second book is actually done and should come out towards the beginning of November. And what I'm starting to do with the second book, which is really cool, is I'm commissioning 4 other pianists that I respect to write arrangements. So there's going to be 4 commissioned arrangements and 4 of my own. So you get to kind of see how people write differently and approach things a little bit differently. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. And
yeah, so I have to ask you, is that okay for us to play written out jazz arrangements? I always feel like I'm cheating if I'm doing that.
So the answer to if it's okay is, yeah, of course, if it gives you joy, if it gives other people joy to hear it, then there's absolutely no negative side to it. If you just don't confuse it with actually playing jazz, right?
Yeah. I'm not going to tell anyone that I'm a jazz pianist if I'm playing this.
And don't use it. I do know some students who use it as kind of a crutch and say, oh, I'm really learning. And it can be educational to learn somebody else's arrangement, but it can be a crutch to starting your own exploration. So I think absolutely it's okay. And I'm thrilled whenever I hear people playing my arrangements. You could play them in recitals. You could bring them to a piano bar or whatever. You could bring them to a gig and do some background cocktail piano. They're a little hard to sight read, so you need to practice them first probably. But no, I think it's absolutely great. You're reminding me of a story. It's been kind of passed down, so I don't know if it's true, but I guess you know who the pianist Art Tatum is? He's one of the great jazz virtuosos. I mean, just unbelievable, to the point where a lot of people play Artatum transcriptions because they're just so virtuosic. There's videos of Horowitz playing Artatum transcriptions. So I guess Artatum walked into a jazz room and somebody was playing one of his transcriptions, and his buddy turned to him and like, Art, they're playing your thing, and he says, yeah, they're playing my notes, but they don't know why I played them.
Oh, interesting.
It's such a great cryptic comment, which kind of shows the difference between playing a transcription, okay, great, versus being the one who knows why those notes are there. So I just like that story. I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. I want to hear about your YouTube channel. So you're doing so many things. You have the books, you have the teaching. I'm sure you're playing different places. Why did you decide to start a YouTube channel as well?
Pure greed. I'm mostly joking. So it's something I kind of fell into. I started making a couple videos of things from my first book. I didn't mention my book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano, which was kind of the first book I self-published. And I made a couple of videos about the nerdiest things in those books. And it's like, oh, let's put this out. It was pandemic. Let's see if anybody sees this. And I was just shocked by how many people were interested in the nerdy things that I was interested in, and the response that those videos got. And, I think algorithms do a lot of bad things in our society. But it does seem like one good thing is connecting people who like the same thing. And so at a certain, I encouraged me to make a couple other videos. And then I have a friend who's a wonderful, wonderful pianist and singer and YouTube creator named Amy Nolte. And she said, the one thing that's important about YouTube is that you're regular, that you post regularly. And, I'd kind of just been doing, oh, here's something interesting whenever it occurred to me. And so it was the pandemic. And I thought, this is kind of interesting how this is all going. So let me commit to a regular schedule. And one thing kind of led to another. And I really like about it a few things. One is it expands my reach. I love my 20 or so students who I'm in very close contact with at Fullerton, but sometimes it can feel like, wow, these are all of the students that I'm really reaching. It feels like a very narrow reach, and some are have other distractions. And so you end up really reaching a few. So the ability to post a video of something I'm interested in and reach 1,000 people or 1,500 people or 2,000 people is really cool, just as a teacher. And then, of course, it's been really great for books and promoting those books. But I was going to say one more thing. Oh, I think just it's been a good place to experiment as a teacher and a pedagogue and to see what people react to try a lesson that's maybe above the level of all of my students and see, okay, I wouldn't teach this actually to any of my current students, but maybe it'll reach some people who are a little bit interested and they'll, say that, or to just try something and I'm not sure about this yet, but let me make a little 15-minute video, pop it up on YouTube and see what kind of reaction I get. So it's just been kind of fun to create a community and advance my teaching and try and be experimental in a way that, in a college class where we have to hit certain marks, I can't really be that experimental. So I am enjoying it, and I enjoy the interactions that I have and the people that I meet, and hopefully, is doing a good thing by, sometimes you hear from people in countries and places where there is not good education, where they can't reach anybody, and people are really dedicated to watching the channel and learning from me. So that feels really good.
Yeah. Well, it looked like you were posting pedagogical videos and also some of you playing. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of whatever I have.
Whatever you feel like.
So yeah, I do post some performance videos when I get good high quality performance videos as well. And I do kind of have the hope that it will, it creates a little audience, because it is hard to find an audience sometimes these days. So yeah, it does a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great. And you're posting a couple times a week. Is that right?
Yeah, I do 2 a week.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah. One piece of advice I got that's been really good is I do almost all of them during school vacations. And okay. I'll not to tell any secrets, but I maybe record 3 or 4 a day for a few weeks. And then it takes care of a whole semester. And then as I get inspired with something, with something else, then I'll I'll sometimes pop something in of, oh, I gave this really cool lesson and the student really responded to this yesterday. So let me just pop onto YouTube for 15 minutes and record that and share it. So it's not all pre-recorded, but yeah, it's too much during the school year, especially now that I have a 1-year-old.
Yes, I'm sure. So I'm curious about that batching where you're recording a whole bunch at once. How do you come up with all those ideas? Do you sit down and like map out all your ideas and then record them all?
Yeah, I do have a running list just in my iPhone notes of YouTube ideas. And I will say the longer that I get into doing my channel, the most obvious ideas are gone. And I won't lie that it's happened to you. It's happened to me more than once that I've recorded a video and I've gone to upload it and I see that I've recorded the exact same video like 2 years ago. I was like,
Which I think is fine. Other people do that all the time, you know?
Yeah. And my audience, I think, they're much less conscious. Nobody's really upset if there's a repeat of a subject or, I cover a lot of the same subjects in slightly different ways. So yeah, it's just a matter of finding some new ways in. And the fact that I am actually teaching students who all have different challenges and who are all bringing different questions means that I'm constantly finding new ways in because they're bringing all of these different things to mind.
Yeah. Okay, so what's next for Jeremy Siskind? What are you looking forward to? You mentioned your book that's going to be coming out. Do you have other projects on the horizon?
Yeah, this is a crazy month. I'm actually recording a new album in about 2 weeks. I'm recording with this incredible vocalist from England named Claire Martin. She's like probably the best known female vocalist in England, but is not too well known because she hasn't had the correct paperwork to come and perform over here a bunch. So she's going to be in town and I just love working with her. So I sprung on that and recording the album. And actually the last drummer from the Bill Evans trio, Joe LaBarbera, is going to be the drummer on that album, which is like, if you're a jazz nerd, playing with anybody who played with Bill Evans is like unbelievable. So preparing for that. And we're actually doing a house concert to try that music in a couple days. Yeah, we've been doing house concerts here. We can fit about 50 or 60 people on like an indoor-outdoor thing because my studio opens up to our driveway. So we're going to have about 65 people here on Sunday for a little concert. So that'll be fun. You're invited now that I know that we're neighbors.
I am? I would love it.
Yeah. I'll send you the info.
Okay.
And then in the beginning of October, I'm giving a TEDx speech, which is a new thing for me.
Wow. Okay.
I'm going to be talking about house concerts, not necessarily the ones that I'm giving, but talking about how we can reach new audiences and talking about a series of almost 200 house concerts that I did with my jazz trio in the 2010s. Yeah, and then I'm working on getting solo standards out, and I'm not really sharing this widely. This will be a real scoop for your podcast.
Okay.
But I've been teaching songwriting for the past 15 years. And so I'm putting some of that material into a book and I'm working on getting that out by probably early 2026.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you know, I have a master's in English. And so I'm really interested in putting music and words together in creative ways. And like I said, I've been teaching that for a while. And so it's like, well, I've got all this material. And I know how to write books now. So let's turn it into a book. So yeah, those are some of the big projects that are on the horizon.
Wow, that's a lot, Jeremy. Oh my goodness.
September's a busy month.
Yeah, it sounds like the next 6 months are kind of busy for you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Not to mention learning Spanish and raising a 1-year-old, right?
Yeah, all in a day's work.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so tell us where we can find all of these resources.
In terms of my books, I always love it when people buy them directly from me at jeremysiskind.com. But you can also get them on Amazon if you're a Prime member and you want that free shipping. They're available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, kind of anywhere that you find books. Let's see. If you're interested in my Fullerton jazz class, which I hope that you are, it's honestly the best educational offering that I offer. You get a lot of feedback. It's very intensive. You can learn more about that at jeremysiskind.com/jazz class. And then my YouTube channel is just youtube.com/jeremysiskind. Yeah, subscribe and hopefully you'll find some things on there that delight you.
All right, Jeremy, this was so delightful to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be here and share your knowledge with us.
It's my pleasure, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I think that the thing I really appreciate about Jeremy is that he is able to understand where classically trained pianists and piano teachers are coming from and meet us in that place, even though his early training was different from many of our more traditional piano lessons. I learned so much just from talking with Jeremy today, and he made me feel like I actually could get his book or take his class and make a lot of progress towards learning jazz piano in the next 6 months. I like how he said that you need to spend 2 weeks on each chapter of his book, because knowing me, I would try to get to the end of the book in 2 weeks and then feel frustrated that I hadn't made any progress. So I appreciated him really breaking that down for me. Let me know what you thought of this episode and what light bulb moments you had while listening to Jeremy talk. That's the end of the show for this week. I'm Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. I will see you right back here next week. Thank you so much for listening.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.